Welcome to Women of the World, a show which gives a voice to women from around the world who have chosen to make the United States their home. Our program believes in the principles written on and enshrined by the Statue of Liberty. Here's today's moderator, Ann McKenna.
Hello viewers, and welcome to the show. My name is Ann McKenna. I am the moderator. And I have an amazing guest to the studio today. But first, I would like to introduce my co-host. And Gloria, if you would please introduce yourself more.
Thank you, Ann. I'm Gloria Van Demeltrot, and I'm delighted to be here. I think this will be a very fascinating show with learning for all of us.
Yes, we will learn quite a little bit today. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And now I have the honor to introduce Dr. Ellen Kennedy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm Ellen Kennedy, and I'm delighted to be back on this show. I'm the founder and executive director of World Without Genocide, a human rights organization located at Mitchell Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. First of all, start by telling us, so you are the founder of this organization.
Yes.
What
yes.
inspired you to start this organization?
Well, that's a very interesting journey that I've been on. I'm Jewish, and I grew up after World War II, of course, with the legacy of the Holocaust. And as I learned and traveled around the world and saw communities all over the world that had been affected by genocides and by other mass atrocities, I felt that there really was a need for more people to stand up against these terrible crimes, to be able to protect themselves, to protect others, and to try to raise the next generation of human rights leaders. So that has really become the central mission of our organization.
It's amazing.
Wonderful. What a wonderful goal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And how did you really get involved in it then? How did you, being aware of it and wanting to do something is one thing, but really getting involved in doing something is another. Can you explain that for us, please?
Oh, Gloria, yes, that's a very important issue for me to talk about. In the summer of 2005, I went to Rwanda. I had been teaching about the genocide in Rwanda for a number of years. I'm a sociologist. I had been an educator for several decades. And when I came back after that very powerful experience in Rwanda, one of my students said to me, after learning about what had happened during that genocide in 1994, when nearly 1 million people were killed in 100 days, she said, "What are we going to do about this?" And that was a moment when I felt called upon to do something, to relate differently in the world compared to what I had been doing. It's what I call my enough moment. I had seen and heard enough that I needed to make a change. And at that time then, I felt I needed to educate others, and most critically, to be able to advocate at local, state, and national levels for policies and legislation to make a difference. So that was a turning point.
How wonderful. We watch the news, we hear about it, and we think, I'm so small, I can't do anything, but bless you for doing something. Tell us what you did, what happened with your involvement then?
Well, I started the organization in a small way, as every human rights organization or every nonprofit begins. And at the time, there was a genocide that had recently begun in the Darfur region of Sudan. So this goes back to January 2006. And I began giving talks. I was invited to speak at Rotary clubs, at churches, at high schools and colleges throughout the region about what was going on in Darfur. And I recently went back and looked at my records. I was invited to give 35 talks that first year.
Wow.
People just heard that somebody could do this. No one else in the region was really trying to bring awareness to the issues, and certainly not trying to advocate for our government to to take something concrete as it steps in response.
So tell us something about the International Criminal Court.
Okay, and let me maybe make a transition from Darfur to that International Criminal Court. One of the problems with trying to hold the perpetrators of that genocide in Darfur to account was, where was the legal mechanism for it? And if we think back to World War II, it wasn't until after World War II that there was an international court. And we know that the name of that court, those of us of a certain age, if nothing else, as the Nuremberg Court, the Nuremberg Trials. And that was an international court that was held in Nuremberg, Germany in 1946 to prosecute the worst of the offenders of World War II. It brought together the 4 allied nations, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, which was our great ally during that conflict. Those 4 nations set up this court together with prosecutors, with judges, with the entire infrastructure for that court. And then after that proceeding, that was the last international tribunal until the early 1990s. And if we reflect on why that was the case, think about what was happening geopolitically. The Soviet Union was our ally during World War II. But after World War II, the Soviet Union became very much an opposition to us with the Cold War. In order for an international tribunal to be created in the post-World War II era, it would have to come from the United Nations. And the United Nations, to do something like that, would have to do it through the Security Council. The Security Council has 5 permanent members and then 10 additional members who are chosen on a rotating basis. 5 permanent members: the United States, Great Britain, France, China, and the Soviet Union. So because of the Soviet Union's antipathy to the United States during the Cold War, any effort for justice set up by the UN and initiated by the United States would not be supported by the Soviet Union. And the way the Security Council was created at the UN after World War II was that any one of those 5 permanent members of that council with a single no vote would eliminate that issue from further discussion. Now we move forward to the early 1990s. What happened in the world? We saw the end of the Soviet Union. We saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. So as geopolitics changed, issues within the Security Council changed. And the United Nations was able to set up 2 international tribunals, one to prosecute and to adjudicate those people suspected of masterminding the genocide in Rwanda that I mentioned in 1994, and the other tribunal to adjudicate the people who masterminded the genocide in former Yugoslavia. And then there were additional courts to address the genocide in Cambodia and the conflict in Sierra Leone, and several other tribunals, all run by the United Nations. But they were short-term, and they were set up only to address a particular conflict. So people from around the world, since the Nuremberg trials after World War II, had long felt there needed to be a permanent court, a permanent international court to prosecute the worst crimes in the world.
That was not part of the United Nations?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that led to the formation of the International Criminal Court.
Okay. How are the judges or justices elected, formed, appointed? Where do they come from, and how are they chosen within the International Criminal Court?
Well, first let's go back to who the member nations are.
Yes.
There are 195 countries in the world. 123 of those countries are members of the International Criminal Court. They have signed on, they have ratified their support for the court. And there is an administrative body of that court that makes decisions to elect the chief prosecutor, to elect the president of the court, to elect all of those people who are involved in running the court. Now, an important question to think about is which country might not be a member of the court.
Correct, yes.
And why?
The United States is not a member of that court.
And others who are not?
There are a number of others who are not. Israel, Qatar, Yemen. We are not in a nice club of those who are not members of that court. President Bill Clinton, in one of his final acts of his presidency, signed on to ratify the United States support for the court. But it would require a vote in the Senate, 67 yes votes, to make that happen. When George W. Bush took office, he took a pencil metaphorically and erased that signature, and in fact expressed great hostility to the court. So the United States has not ever become a member. Under the Obama administration, there was a more favorable relationship with the court, but the U.S. is still not a member.
Not a member.
Correct.
Okay. Do you believe that will happen eventually?
I am certainly very, very hopeful. All of our Western-related countries are members. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Western Europe, 123 countries are members of this court. This is the only permanent court in the world to prosecute the worst of the crimes on the planet. And those crimes are genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. This court prosecutes not countries for perpetrating those crimes, but it prosecutes individuals, just like the Nuremberg trial did, prosecuting individuals.
How successful have they been in prosecuting individuals for genocidal crimes and of the crimes, other crimes of this nature? Has it worked? That's what I'm asking.
This court has a very interesting mandate. This court is to be used as a court of last resort. Its purpose is to be used only when a country where the crime has occurred is either unwilling or unable to handle that issue in its own domestic courts. And from that perspective, I feel very strongly that this court has been a remarkable force for good on the planet. We have to think back to what these crimes are like. The crime of genocide, which is the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. A crime against humanity, not directed at a specific group, such as those I just enumerated, but against the wholesale intent to exterminate vast numbers of people, like in Congo, where 6 million people have been brutally murdered since 1996. War crimes, the crime of aggression, these are the worst crimes. And the court has indeed been successful in bringing charges of guilt towards those who have used child soldiers, to those who have been convicted of the worst crimes of sexual violence and so on, the worst offenders on our planet.
So one of the things I saw is that you are very gender focused. in
Yes.
your organization.
Yes, very true.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. If we think about the worst of the crimes in the world, women and girls are almost always the first to be attacked. And they are the first to be attacked because they're the most vulnerable. And we as women, are also the carriers of a culture. If we are raped, if we are impregnated by enemy forces, the offspring that we have are no longer part of our own cultural group. This is what has been termed ethnic cleansing, the dilution of a particular group, the changing of it, the lessening of its value. The women and girls who are subjected to sexual violence are seen as being outcasts from their own communities. Now we see that not only on the global stage, but we see these sexual violence acts perpetrated in horrific numbers here in the United States. 1 out of every 3 women in her lifetime will experience sexual violence in our own country. And yet if we look at the extent to which the perpetrators are held accountable, the proportion is outrageous, just outrageous. These are what we call crimes of opportunity, meaning that women are weaker, they are defenseless, they are often without resort to safety and security, and these become crimes of impunity. These crimes go unpunished. The criminal justice system, whether it's at the global level or at the local level, turns away from these crimes. And this must be changed.
I've done a little bit of study on the Geneva Conventions.
Yes.
How does the ICC, or the International Criminal Court, differ from the results of the Geneva Conventions, the laws that were formed from those
Gloria,
meetings?
a great question. The Geneva Conventions were codified in 1949, and it's about 600 specific articles that say very carefully what is illegal during war. So how prisoners of war must be treated, how those who are working for humanitarian organizations such as the Red Cross must be treated, how civilians must be protected. But the Geneva Conventions do not set forward any way to actually enforce those articles. And that's what an organization like the International Criminal Court is charged with doing. It is charged, as I mentioned, with 4 crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, which includes the Geneva Conventions, and the crime of aggression, which means waging war. So the Geneva Conventions fit under the International Criminal Court. But in 2017, at the annual administrative meeting of the court, and I was very privileged to be there, they expanded and added to the list of those war crimes to include some of the terrible weaponry that we see today. So these are issues that must constantly be updated as the practice of war and mass atrocity becomes ever more heinous.
This is very intense work
Yes.
that you are doing. It's intense, and you definitely seem that it's something that is in your heart to do.
Yes.
So how do you take care of yourself on a personal level?
You know, that's something that I talk about with my staff all the time as well. The term is vicarious traumatization.
Yes.
That reading about these issues can create trauma in us, even if we are not present to see it. And certainly, if we are so blessed as to not be the ones to experience it directly. But all of us will, on different days, at different moments, feel it. And it's important to practice self-care, to watch out for these signs in us, to talk to other people, to exercise, to have a healthy diet, to have hobbies that we can engage in that allow us to pursue things that are very positive, and then to do some things that are really frivolous. Eat good ice cream, buy a fun pair of shoes, whatever it might be. But that issue of self-care, regardless of the work that most of us do, has to be part of our lives, all of us, men and women, in all that we face.
What a great response, Ellen. Thank you for that. I'm a writer and a voracious reader as well. And I find I recently read a book that was so depressing because it was horror from the beginning to the end, terrible things happening. And I found myself so depressed by the end of that book. It was just awful. And I wrote a review of it actually very recently, that we can't, what happens when you dwell on the horrible things happening, you finally get immune to it after a while.
Right.
And we need to add a little what we call comic relief. And your description of taking care of ourselves and taking care of our body, our minds, our emotional states is so important in dealing with life.
Right.
And when we deal with terrible things such as you are doing, what a wonderful response to that. You do a great deal of speaking about this, I understand. Can you tell us more about that and the results of it as well?
I've been an educator, as I mentioned, for most of my adult life, but I always say to people, knowledge is not power. Knowledge plus action equals power. And at our organization, we educate in order to advocate. And this really touches on that issue, Gloria, of a book filled only with the horrors. It certainly is critical to learn about these issues. But people come to hear me speak, whether it's here or California or in a country overseas, and they will walk out feeling a little bit taller with a smile on their face, because we will have told them how they can make a difference in the world by making a certain phone call, signing letters at the event, getting on board with our particular action steps to change the world. This is the only way that change happens, from the bottom up. And our work, even though we're dealing with the darkest of the dark, ultimately is dealing always with hope. And with hope that comes from every one of us in the way that we can make a difference. And every single one of us has that responsibility. We are citizens of this planet. Even those who are stateless today are still belonging on this planet. And every one of us has a responsibility to one another. I'm Jewish by birth, by faith, and I was taught a phrase as a very little girl. And I was taught that we're on this planet for one reason only, and that is tikkun olam, a Hebrew phrase that means repair of the world. That's what we are here to do.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
I don't care if people engage with these great big issues that I deal with, or if they want to do something important in their family or their neighborhood. But the issue is that every single day do one thing. And before you know it, you will look back on your life and you will be able to say, what a difference.
That's very exciting. And of course, it's so clear that you are very passionate about what you believe and a person of action. And I like what you say is knowledge is in itself, it's not power.
No.
But it's knowledge with the action. And personally, I'm huge on preaching on application.
Great.
Application,
Great.
because there's so many people that know a lot of things, but it's not helping them.
No.
It's not helping them. So the action part is definitely extremely, it's the biggest part, is taking action.
On our website, we have a whole section called Toolkits for Action. So take a look, worldwithoutgenocide.org, Toolkits for Action, and you will see action steps on so many different issues that are critical in our world today, and very specific things that each of us can do to make a positive difference,
And
from the simple to the more more complicated.
Worldwithoutgenocide.org.
Correct.
Great, thank you for
Correct.
that. But tell us, if you would, what are your future hopes for this organization? What are you hoping for to happen with it?
For World Without Genocide?
Yes.
We have two programs that I care very deeply about. Every summer, we run an institute for high school and college students. And during the academic year, we run a fellowship program. It's called the Benjamin B. Ferencz Fellowships in Human Rights and Law. Ben Ferencz is the last surviving prosecutor from the Nuremberg war trials. Wow. He's now in his 99th year.
Oh, my word.
And he has given us the great honor of being able to use his name for these fellowships. He has truly been a remarkable friend to us. These two programs are engaging with the next generation of human rights leaders. Both programs have been recognized by the state of Minnesota with the Ethical Leadership Award. So my hope, my vision, is that we will continue to make a difference. Our young people are going out and doing remarkable things in the world. I just had a note this morning from a former employee of mine of 3 years. She is now in a doctoral program in Europe studying peace and conflict. And just think about what her reach will be as a professor. She will reach thousands of others in her lifetime. We are seeding human rights from the bottom up wherever we can.
We are getting very low on time, but can you tell us a little bit, as quickly as you can, what countries have you traveled to?
Oh my goodness. I'm wearing bracelets, and I'll show these to your viewers. These bracelets have flags from almost 50 different countries.
Oh my.
And my husband and I have been blessed to travel widely. And we go to places to learn about the human rights issues, to meet with the people, and to try to understand more so that we can bring stories back to people in Minnesota and other places in the world.
Well, thank you very much, Ellen, for being here in the studio today and for the information that you have shared with us. It's been very educational, and your passion is amazing. So thank you for being here.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, welcome. And to Gloria, thank you for co-hosting the show with me. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm delighted to be here. And Dr. Ellen Kennedy, thank you so much for sharing such great information with us. This was fascinating to learn about. Thank you.
It's an honor to be with the viewers. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching the show. And Ellen has a website called worldwithoutgenocide.org. Please check that website for more information about the work that she's doing. And we'll see you again at Women of the World show.